What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Today we'll talk about the most recent developments of the ongoing conflict in the Kursk region, a battleground that has rapidly become one of the most significant theaters in the war between Russia and Ukraine. In this video, we will unpack the intricate dynamics of the Kursk operation, scrutinize the broader military strategies, and consider the long-term consequences for both nations. We will also reflect on the impact of this conflict on the Russian population and examine the trajectories this war might take, including the potential mobilization that Putin might announce. By the end of this video, you'll gain a deeper insight into the pressing issues and strategic calculations shaping the critical moment in history. As we all know, the Kursk region has emerged as a pivotal area in the broader conflict, with the Ukrainian armed forces steadily advancing their positions over the past several weeks. This operation has not only resulted in thousands of Russians being either occupied or captured, but according to the most recent information, it has also displaced between 120,000 and 200,000 people, turning them into refugees literally overnight. These developments have eclipsed other major events that, under different circumstances, would have dominated global attention. The successful Ukrainian offensive allowed to seize control of key strategic points, most notably the town of Sudzha, while simultaneously capturing a significant number of young Russian conscripts. The situation in Glushkovo County is particularly dire as well. This strategically crucial area, a narrow corridor between Ukrainian-controlled territory and the same river, has become the epicenter of intense military activity. Ukrainian forces have effectively severed the Russian supply lines in this region, crippling their ability to maintain and resupply their forward positions. The destruction of bridges, once vital for the transportation of military supplies, has left Russian conscripts isolated and vulnerable, facing the full force of Ukraine's professional, mechanized and air assault forces. The logical challenges in such a scenario are immense. Military operations, especially in contested areas, demand a continuous flow of supplies, ranging from food and fuel to obviously ammunition. The notorious Russian BTR-80, a heavily relied upon armored personnel carrier, exemplifies this with its significant fuel consumption, estimated to be around 100 liters for 100 kilometers or around 2.3 miles per gallon. This highlights the critical nature of secure and functioning supply lines. The disruption caused by the Ukrainian armed forces has severely compromised Russian operational capabilities, putting their forces at a substantial disadvantage. Despite these setbacks, the Russian troops are not entirely trapped, not yet. They are at a great risk of it. The same river, while a formidable obstacle, offers a potential escape route. However, retreating across a river under enemy fire is one of the most complex military maneuvers. It requires precise coordination and constant cover to prevent a chaotic and deadly stampede. Is the Russian military commandment capable of doing it? Well, I highly doubt it. Should Russian forces fail to secure adequate supplies, they may be forced to retreat, yielding additional territory, up to 700 square kilometers to Ukrainian control. As the Ukrainians solidify their gains, digging in along the river banks, the Russians face the challenging task of regaining lost ground under increasingly unfavorable conditions. The conflict in the Kursk region, while critical, is just one part of a much larger and more complex war. Even as the battle rages on in Kursk, the Russian military continues its offensive in the Donbas region, advancing through towns like Toretsk and Pokrovsk. However, the strategic values of these gains is questionable, especially when weighed against the staggering human and material costs. Towns like Solidar, Bakhmut and Avdiivka have been reduced to rubble. Their capture, achieved at the expense of thousands of lives, have little to show for it, beyond only symbolic victories. The Russian strategy, which prioritizes incremental territorial gains at enormous costs, seems increasingly unsustainable. What a surprise. Urban warfare, particularly in fortified enemy territory, presents immense challenges. Defenders, benefiting from the familiarity of the terrain and prepared positions, can inflict significant casualties on advancing forces. The cities of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, which lie ahead, are substantially larger and more defensible in comparison to previous targets like once again Bakhmut, making their capture even more complex. Each one of them is the size of 3 Bakhmuts, so you can only imagine how long and how costly it will be for the Russian army to capture them, if they decide to do it, obviously. The need for the attacking forces to outnumber defenders by at least 3 to 1 further complicates Russian efforts. Compounding these challenges is the dual-front nature of Russia's current military commitments. The ongoing needs to defend against Ukrainian advances in Kursk while simultaneously pushing towards in the Donbass stretches Russian resources to their limits. This has raised serious questions about the long-term viability of Russia's military strategy, as the human toll of the conflict continues to climb. The Russian leadership, however, appears determined to press on, with each small victory framed as a significant success despite the heavy price in lives and material. This narrative, promoted by President Putin and the Ministry of Defense, highlights a deep disconnect between the reality of the war and the image projected by the Russian government. The symbolic importance of raising the Russian flag over captured small towns is treated with the same importance as the historic victory over Nazi Germany in World War II, regardless of the actual strategic values of these conquests. This approach underscores a broader trend within the Russian military and political circles, where symbolic gestures often prioritized over pragmatic considerations. As the war drags on and Russian forces face increasing pressure both in the Kursk region and the Donbass region, the probability of mass mobilization looms even larger. The recent successes of the Ukrainian military have reignited fears of a new wave of conscription in Russia. Most recent Western military intelligence reports suggest that the Kremlin may be preparing for a significant expansion of its military recruitment efforts, potentially initiating another round of mandatory mobilization. The possibility of a new mobilization is particularly concerning given the current political and social climate in Russia. The government retains several options for increasing its military manpower, including offering substantial financial incentives to volunteers, recruiting foreign nationals from economically disadvantaged regions, and redeploying new conscripts who are already considered active duty personnel. Alternatively, the government may choose to enforce a new draft without the need for additional legal decrees, relying on existing authority granted by previous mobilization orders. For many Russian citizens, particularly young men of military age, the prospect of being conscripted and sent to the front lines is a source of deep anxiety. The government's ability to manipulate public perception and enforce its will through coercive measures means that avoiding conscription is becoming increasingly difficult. The recent return of many military-age men to Russia after initially fleeing to avoid the draft back in September 2022 highlights the major problem of the situation. The government's tactics may include a renewed focus on these individuals, using the threat of conscription to maintain control and meet the military's manpower needs. Despite the fear of mobilization, the Russian government must also consider the potential for widespread resistance. The prospect of mass unrest driven by a population pushed to its limits possesses a significant threat to the stability of the regime. This delicate balancing act between maintaining military strength and avoiding domestic resistance will likely shape the government's decisions in the coming months. The potential for both a new wave of conscription and targeted recruitment efforts is real, and the consequences for the Russian society could be extraordinary. As the war grinds on, the human cost continues to escalate. The conflict has already claimed thousands of lives, and the prospects of further escalation remains a constant threat. For the Russian people, the impact of this war extends beyond the immediate loss of life. The social and economic fabric of the country is being strained, as families grapple with the reality of a war that seems increasingly distant from their daily lives, but ever present in its consequences. The government's attempts to downplay the severity of the situation through propaganda and distraction only adds to the sense of unease and disillusionment among the population. For those directly affected by the conflict, particularly conscripts and their families, the future is full of uncertainty. Many are struggling to cope with the harsh realities of war they did not choose, while facing the possibility of being drawn further into a conflict that offers little hope of resolution. The biggest advice is to avoid conscription and stay out of the military. The desire to preserve one's life and sanity in the face of such overwhelming challenges is a powerful motivator, and many young men are determined to avoid being caught up in the war at all costs. The emphasis on avoiding military service and staying safe underscores the deep mistrust many Russians feel towards their government's handling of the conflict. Looking ahead, the future of this conflict remains uncertain. The Russian government faces a difficult choice: continue the costly and destructive war in Ukraine, or seek a negotiated settlement that could bring an end to the fighting. However, the latter option would require a significant shift in the government's stance, one that seems unlikely given the current rhetoric and military strategy. The resolution of this conflict will depend on a complex interplay of factors, including the willingness of both sides to negotiate, the capacity of the Russian military to sustain its operations, and the broader international community's response. As the war continues, the human cost will only increase, pressing the urgent need for a peaceful solution. The stakes are high, not only for the Russian and Ukrainian people, but for the stability of the region as a whole. The ongoing conflict in the Kursk region and the broader war between Russia and Ukraine represents a critical juncture in the history of both nations. For the Russian people, the message is clear: avoid the battlefield, preserve your lives, and resist the government's attempts to draw you into a conflict that serves no justification purpose. The path to peace through difficult is the only way to ensure a future free from the horrors of the war. It is imperative that all parties involved seek a peaceful resolution that can end the suffering and destruction and restore stability to the region. Guys, if you did enjoy today's episode, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below: PayPal donation, Patreon subscriptions for additional bonus perks. You can also buy the Russian Dude merch. You can find all the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.